So Donald Trump has brought in his tariffs, and it's upset everybody because it is bigger than they were expecting.
I mean, isn't this exactly what he's been saying he would do since before he was elected?
About the last 30 or 40 years. Yes, he's been saying it. He would do this if he was in a position to do so, and he's actually done it. The worrying thing for me is that every single take I've seen on this is just plain wrong. Every take on the mainstream media, on the financial press, on the Republican side, the MAGA side, the libtard side, everybody is not getting this. But actually, if you just read a little bit deeper into what Trump is saying, his side comments, it does explain what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to explain the whole lot. I will not be getting into the role of the dollar itself. So we've got this brokenomics on the Empire of Dollars that addresses that angle. So if you've got any comeback on, I didn't explore that option. That's fine. I've only got a 20-minute segment here. If I do a brokenomics on tariffs, I'll get into all of this. But yeah, I am aware of that fact. I just don't think it's necessary for this. So first of all, let's get into the actual big news itself that came out last night and shocked the world. Let's play a little bit of this so we just get a feel for where the man is at.
So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less, so how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly, they rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they make...
Right, okay, so I'll stop that there.
So he's basically just taken the tariffs that they're charging the US and halved them and said, here you go.
He's saying that he's doing that.
All right.
Claiming that he's doing that. So, for example, if you get down to the UK, I mean, I won't play the UK bit, but the UK gets like a 10% tariff. With things we're not charging him 10%. I mean, we got a 2.5% fee that we charge everybody, and that's about it. And you could try and claim that he's factoring in VAT or something like that, but that's not it either. So he's presenting these. And by the way, I'm on Trump's side on all of this. I'm just saying that the framing that he is giving us is not actually correct. So he's framing it as if those are the charges of American goods going in, and then he's just halving it. That's what he wants you to think. Because this is actually going to be a tax raise on Americans. And again, actually I do support it, and I'll get into why.
Only if they're buying the foreign stuff, though, right?
Yeah. But I mean, tariffs are paid by the country that they arrive in. So you can't. I mean, you can't tax somebody in Vietnam.
If with tariffs, just to clarify for me, if you are an importer, when you import those goods, you pay the people who are exporting it, and then the tariffs you pay on top of that.
Well, no, you pay a duty when you receive something in.
Yeah,
you'll be charged a levy on that.
If you just buy an American car instead of a European Union car or a Japanese car, then
there won't be any tariff.
Right, and isn't that the whole point?
But wouldn't the cost?
Well, yes.
Wouldn't the costs come back if the materials that have been used to build that car have been imported themselves and they have the tariffs on top of them? So that would extend the cost as well.
Yeah, that would push up the cost, but still you want to be doing the value add bit in America. So you want to do as much in America as you can. Well, if you're American, you do anyway.
The whole point of protectionism is to encourage domestic manufacture, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, you two have nailed it straight away. This is something the entire commentariat cannot get their head around what's going on here, and essentially what it is because America is in a completely unsustainable position, and they just can't kick the can down the road forever. Now I'm going to give you one because there's lots. It was like 50 minutes long, this thing, and it's mostly him telling us how great he is and how everybody loves him, which is fair enough. I mean, he is Trump. But there was one key line at the end, so I'll read that. If you want your tariff rate to be zero, then build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build the plant, your product in America, Trump said. And that's how he signed off.
Offshore to us.
Yeah, bring it back. Bring it back. That's what he's saying. Now, let me just build up on my point about how the current situation is unsustainable. Because the entire commentariat, even right-wing commentariat, are coming at this from the line of this is a variation of where we are now, and it put costs up against where we are now, and therefore it is a bad thing. Right, but here's the problem. Right? Where we are now is mental. So this is the US debt clock.
I think I'm having a stroke looking at this.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit busy, but I'll point out the key areas. So the US national debt, it's like 37 trillion. That's insane. How did we get to a position like that? Okay, so the US spends...
That's about 100 grand every 5 seconds it's going up.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Well, a bit less than that, I think. No, a bit faster than that. So the US is spending 7 trillion every year, and it's collecting in taxes 5 trillion every year. So, and in fact, I'll quickly go to the world level that just gives you the quick balance. Right, so the US debt and its GDP is about the same thing. Now, that's actually quite helpful when the two numbers are the same, because then you simply need to ask one question: which is growing faster? The debt is growing faster, and therefore the debt will consume everything if this isn't stopped. So the current situation that the US is in is insane. This has to be stopped. As you can see here, the US does not have a tax-raising problem as such. It has a spending problem. But all the time it's got that enormous 2 trillion deficit, it is just unwinding the roots of the country. So that has to be turned around quickly. So when you hear about how mad it is, just remember that, no, where we are starting from is the mad bit. The US needs to cut its spending, and that's what Doge is all about, and it's going to have to raise a bit of revenue in the meantime as well, because it's got to get that down. It can bring in future tax cuts in the future, and I think that's what's going to happen.
Do we know where most of that spending is coming from? Because I've recently started reading Super Imperialism by Michael Hudson, and in the introduction to that, he talks about how in the 1970s, when he originally wrote it, he'd done some kind of revenue check of how the US was spending its money, and found that basically the entirety of the deficit was going off into international military spending. So military bases, wars being fought. Obviously, it was the time of Vietnam as well, but a lot of people would put it down to the military-industrial complex. Is that still the case?
I can answer that question, actually. Yeah, Samson, if you put it back on screen. So basically, it's transfers to boomers, people who don't want to work, blowing stuff up and paying debt. So first one there,
nice and simple there.
Yeah, Medicare, Medicaid, that takes up 1.5 trillion. Social Security, that's another 1.5 trillion. Defence is another trillion, basically. I think it's much bigger than that number once you factor in all the intelligence services stuff as well. But yeah, it's probably closer to another 1.5 rather than just under one. And then debt, interest that they've got to pay, and that's mental, because at least with that you've got happy boomers. At least with that, you've got people in inner cities waddling around getting corn syrup stuffed down their throat, not having to work. So at least you're getting something, and at least with that, you get to watch a pretty explosion. But with that,
the hegemon of the world.
Yes.
I mean, this is the cost of empire.
Fair enough, but this bit, that debt interest, that's just 1 trillion that is just going up in smoke. That's just the bill coming due on all the rampant spending of the past few decades. Right, so this
so annoying when you get an overdraft. You get charged for using your overdraft.
Yeah.
Or when you look at the interest on your own mortgage.
Yeah.
And won't that be? Will that be interest that they need to repay to their own banks?
All over the place. Some of it will be their own citizens' pension funds. Some of it will be China. Some of it will be, the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi. It'd be going all over the place. That money. But anyway, so this situation cannot stand. This has to change. But the thing is, he can't just come out and say, I'm going to. It's two things he's achieving. Partly, it's a bit of a tax increase, but he can't come out and say, I'm raising taxes on American, although all his critics are going to make that claim, so I need to address it. But actually, it's more about reorientating stuff. America doesn't need cheap Chinese tat. What America needs is homes and jobs. And that is what he's actually trying to change. In fact, I'll show you. Here we go. We've got the actual tariffs. Interestingly, it appears that it's being derived from a simple Excel formula rather than what he's claiming, which is reciprocal tariffs. I will come to that in a second.
Still, it's interesting that if those numbers, the numbers saying what the other countries are charging the United States, if they're even remotely true or close, that's remarkable to me. Because look at it. I mean, it's sort of mad. You talk about free trade, or Donald Trump's the enemy of free trade. Well, wait a minute. What about everyone else in the whole world?
It's saying tariffs charged, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So
it's not really that. I mean, a lot of these countries do have effective tariffs against the United States, so it's not completely wrong, but it's not really right either.
I mean, if you look at some of the big ones there, like Vietnam's massive, or Cambodia, or Myanmar, saw on there, Madagascar. I mean, or Laos.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, the Vietnam War
countries,
but not Madagascar.
Madagascar, a big threat of importing American goods.
Well, exactly. This is what I was going to say. I mean, what is Vietnam and Madagascar importing from the United States? Now, it's all worked out on physical goods, which is key. It is not including
commodities.
Services.
Right, okay.
Right. So if you are a Lotus Eaters subscription holder, don't be worried, you're probably not going to get tariffed for watching the Lotus Eaters. Although the Islander probably will get tariffed.
I was just going to say, what about the island?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
But at least the UK is down at 10% because we also have a fantasy economy. I'll be coming to that. Right, and actually, on the point of how these were worked out, some guy figured it out. So basically, what they're doing is they're taking the trade deficit divided by the exports, leaving out services.
Okay, so that's quite low resolution anyway, you cut it then.
Yeah, but essentially what it's doing is people who send us real stuff, if we're not sending them an equal amount of real stuff back, they're getting a bigger tariff. And that kind of explains why Vietnam, the rate is so high, and why China, the rate is so high, is because those countries are actually doing real things.
Manufacturing.
Well, I mean, in Vietnam, I don't know how much it's manufacturing. It's probably sewing a lot of T-shirts and stuff like that. A lot of garments are probably being made there. But nevertheless, it is a real thing. That's getting shipped over to America, and America, of course, doesn't send much to Vietnam, thus the huge imbalance. Yeah. So effectively, the way you've got to think about this is he is going after real things. He wants to rebalance real things being moved into the United States and real work being done in the United States. And the criticism of all of this is you're going to push up costs, you're going to push up taxes and stuff, and you're going to damage the economy. Now, yes, he is going to damage the economy, right? But let's get to the sort of big takeaway here. Good. Because what is the real... I'm going to show you what the real US economy looks like. Can we play this video?
My coworkers keep saying I need to make it like a tech TikTok, because if you look at my TikTok, you never guess I have a job. So anyways, this is our current workstation. Callie and I are what you call product managers. Callie, what is your team over?
My team is over reporting and internal tools.
And I am over what we call card experience. So we work on like anything from activating your credit card to freezing, reissue, shipping, all the good stuff. What's a PM?
We help prioritize and help the engineers stay on track and help them know what to build so that you have a product to use.
Yeah, exactly. So you might have a team, like the engineers actually do the developing, the coding, which is the impressive part. Designers also do the impressive part.
Right, okay, you get the point.
You know when a little kid, a small child, like a 5 or 6 year old, it starts parroting adults and obviously don't know what they're saying, or perhaps a foreign language actor doing Shakespeare, and they're just reading the line. They're saying the words.
Yeah. But
they obviously have got no idea what they're saying or what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That was the impression I got about these two young ladies.
I was thinking more like when a small child wants to help you do some DIY housework, and they obviously can't actually do anything. So you give them, say, a nut and a screw, and you say, solve this for me. And they go off in the corner and they think that they're helping, but you're just getting them out of the way.
So that... Right, except we in the Western world,
20-year-old women,
yes, have created an entire society and an economy that made up work for women has become the economy, right? So she's probably getting paid 60, 70, maybe 80k a year.
I mean, do you remember those TikToks from a few years ago of my life, a day in the life of a Chicago tech worker? and it's just girls going for brunch with their friends.
Yeah.
They sit down for half an hour, answer a few emails, and then they go and play pool for the rest of the evening and get drunk.
This is entirely my big point. Yes, when the lefties say that these tariffs are going to damage the US economy, yes, it will damage the US economy, but that's because the US economy is not entirely, but largely absolute bullshit. That's the problem. Right? It is
That
not
sounds about right.
It is not a well-engineered, perfect structure with no faults that must be preserved because of its purity. No, it's an economy run on debt, importing cheap plastic tap from China. You have women working absolute bullshit. Meanwhile, you have good men in large parts of the country hooked on opium and unemployed because there's no real work, no manufacturing, nothing tangible, nothing real. That's the problem. That is what Trump is trying to address. So real economics is happening in Asia. Real stuff is getting done. Bullshit wankery like this is happening in the West. And basically those high tariffs, as you saw before, they're targeting the real stuff. They're creating an incentive for that real stuff to be sent over and done in America, which is why the UK tariffs are so low. So again, everybody's take on this is wrong. You're going to see some people saying that the low tariff that UK is paying is a Brexit dividend or something like that, or Keir Starmer's cool negotiation handling of Trump. No, it's none of that. It's because our economy is as much bullshit as their economy, and therefore we don't make any real stuff because Asia's doing all of it, and so therefore we get a low tariff rate because we're also a bullshit economy. Yeah. That's what's going on.
The other angle I saw, which I thought was palpably nonsense, I wonder what you're taking on it. It was a picture, a cartoon, drawing, a meme of Trump taking a piss, and the piss is just blowing back into his face.
I didn't see that.
It was just some stupid cartoon on Twitter, and I was like, "This is what tariffs are. This is what America's doing to itself by." And I was like, "No, that's not right."
In a way,
if Trump wants to increase manufacturing in the United States, then he's not pissing in his own face at all.
Also,
it's a good idea.
Leftists are always in favour of massively hiking taxes on large corporations, except for when all of a sudden it's done in the form of tariffs, which will basically do the same thing, because it's a tax that might encourage large corporations to actually onshore work that could help American people.
I mean,
rather than just give out free handouts via.
I mean, no taxes really fall on corporations. They always fall on consumers in the end. But I mean, I take your point. The lefties can't get their messaging right on this stuff.
Take car manufacture for an example, because that's easy for everyone to get their mind around. A foreign car manufacturer, I don't know, like Toyota or something, or BMW or Audi or something like that. Trump's simply saying, look, if you want to sell tons of Toyotas in the United States, just build a Toyota factory in the United States.
Yeah, instead of building them in
and what he's doing then,
Indonesia, and then shipping them,
probably work, right? It should work.
Yeah.
And that's simply in America's interest.
Yes. I mean, it's simple, and you guys get it straight away. But honestly, the entire commentariat cannot see this. They cannot see past the end of their nose. And just to return to your point about the comic about him pissing in his own face, well, that's what it looks like to them, because in the short term, this will damage the economy, people like this, because next time she wants to buy a flat screen TV, it's going to cost more. Right. Because there are going to be tariffs from wherever it gets imported in. And you got to remember,
unless she buys American.
I don't know how many TVs are produced in America.
Sorry.
I'd imagine that has gone down a bit like the car industry and stuff like that. But the game plan here is not to look good week by week like Biden was doing. So what Biden was doing is, he was making an enormous mess, and I kept on saying this throughout the Biden presidency. I kept on coming in and making these points during the podcast. Is I don't think most people realise how damaging Biden is being with his debt and his insane government spending and all the rest of it.
Bidenomics.
Yeah, but what he did on the short term is he would get like the Department of Jobs or whatever to produce numbers that were fake, that made him look better than he was, and then they just revise it like a year later and say, oh, actually no, those numbers from a year ago, we've had to revise them. And then there was a massive revision the day that Trump came in, say, oh yeah, all those Trump numbers, they're a bit made up. So his thing was looking good short term, All you have to do is walk outside, put down the New York Times, which is telling you that the economy is good. Walk outside and you can see for yourself that clearly isn't it. So, but the problem is now is that Trump is going to have a difficult period for the next 18 months or couple of years at least, because this is going to impose costs, but the economy is not going to readjust that quickly. If people want to reshore manufacturing, it's going to take a couple of years to get that online. So he's got a problem for the midterms because all of the cost is going to fall short term. This is why he's acting so fast. This is why he's doing it right away. Like he's only been in for like 100 days or something, and he's already pulling sort of big moves like this. People aren't getting it right, and I did think about including some reaction from people, and I watched a whole bunch of, like Ursula von der Leyen and the Australian PM, and I watched whole loads of news panel reactions and stuff like that, and they're all basically saying the same thing, just in a really boring and missing the point way. You can't see past the end of their nose. And eventually I found a comment on Zero Hedge, which is a bit more fruity, and it sort of makes the point. But basically every single response is this, in a different way. So I'll read this to you. Right? So he's saying, absolute effing moron spouting lies and crackhead economic theories that will F over his supporters. F Congress, utterly absent. It's their authority that he's usurping. Cowards. When America implodes, make sure everyone remembers the lunatic and his MAGA lemmings. Unthinking cretins deserve to be coming down on a pike. Tariffs are taxes paid by Americans, 4 exclamation marks after the word Americans there. Tariffs are paid by Americans when they buy imported products. Virtually everything is imported, in whole or in part. Everything you buy is going up. Right. Now to you, sir, in order to understand the problem here, all you need to do is read your own comment. Yeah. The bit that I've highlighted there. Virtually everything is imported.
That's what Trump's trying to tackle. That's the whole point of this, is to tackle that.
That is the point. Yeah. I mean, he actually wrote it down himself. Virtually everything is imported. He wrote it himself, and he can't see the problem. All he can see is that next time he goes to buy a flat screen TV or a polo shirt, it's going to cost a bit more. Cannot get his head right. I didn't want to do too much reaction to it because it's just annoying. I will do one from Mike Pence, who is an absolute snake, obviously, but he's also an incompetent, short-sighted, foolish snake, because here he is going on about tariffs and about how it's going to put the cost of for American families up $3,500 per year. So he's basically saying, your imported Chinese tat is going to get more expensive.
Yeah, it goes up $3,500 per year if you insist on buying foreign things.
Yes.
There's quite a big caveat. You don't have to do that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that made North America such a powerful country, the USA, in the first place, was the fact that it was so resource rich, and there was so much manufacturing being done, particularly in the northeast of the country, in like the New England. And
they were a powerhouse at one time.
Yeah. It turned them into an economic powerhouse that were almost entirely able to sustain themselves, and that's what made them so powerful.
Yep. You kind of need to go back to my first link, the Broconomics, the Empire of Dollars, to kind of see how that unravelled, which I can't get into here. But you're absolutely right.
We've talked about that before. There's only a few countries in the world that are capable of being entirely self-sufficient.
Yeah, and the US is one
in terms of resources, and the United States is one of them. Yeah. So there's absolutely no reason why they can't become a powerhouse of manufacturing again. There's no reason.
All it takes is a bit of leadership and somebody willing to destroy the US economy short term, by which I basically mean bullshit women's work and
say to that last
Chinese tat.
And say to that last guy you just had up there going effing morons. Say to people like that, just be quiet, child.
Yes. Yeah, shut up. Well, and also to Mike Pence, because I don't think we ripped into him enough either. So let me tell you about Mike. Mike cannot see the big picture. Mike cannot. I mean, you two got it straight away. which is really good because honestly, I've watched so much reaction and none of them got it the way that you two got it straight away.
Well, I think people like Mike Pence and a lot of the other people aren't necessarily looking at it from a national perspective. They're looking at it from a globalist perspective. And from a globalist perspective, this will hamper free trade. This will renationalize the American economy, which is a bad thing as far as they're concerned. I keep seeing this clip get popped up on my timeline every so often where some anti-MAGA Republican will say, now this is real conservatism, and it's a clip of George W. Bush after he was done in office, where he's saying, oh, there's 3 big isms that have plagued America in the past. One of them is isolationism, the other is protectionism, and the final one is nativism. And it's
like all of those is Americans looking after Americans.
Yeah, that was what made America great in the 19th century, was all of those things, not getting involved in foreign wars so they could build themselves up without constant disruption, not having to compete with foreign manufacturers for everything because they could just build everything themselves. And obviously nativism, they had lots of massive amounts of immigration at separate points, but towards the middle of the 20th century, before 65's Immigration Act, they were starting to have a kind of ethnogenesis with the American mindset, and then that completely got thrown aside when they went, let's open it up to third world immigration.
I've just seen a comment scroll past in the chat that I like, so I'm going to read it now. He's saying, our economy is a cancer and Trump just ordered chemo. Yeah, that's it. What happens when you start getting chemo? You get sicker. And then you get better.
But is it not just funny that some of these people will go back to George W. Bush, war criminal, and say like, now, can't we return to the glory days of American conservatism when he just did everything against the best intentions of the American people?
Yes. I just want to rip Mike a little bit more because, he's saying that the average family is going to be $3,500 a year worse off. People like Mike, in Mike circles, are probably going to be paying a lot less and a lot more than $3,500 because they buy a lot of imported stuff that they don't need. I'll tell you who's not going to be paying more. It's going to be people like his mates. Now, I'm not building up Oliver Anthony as an individual because...
Funny steal you chose.
Yeah, there's obvious issues there. I'm talking about the kind of people who lives in the kind of town he comes from, the kind of people that he went to school with. They're not going to be paying an extra $3,500 because they don't have a bloody job. And they're not spending all their time buying flat screen TVs from China. What they do is they want a job and they want a house. And guys that he went to school with are not the sort of guys who are going to get a job like those girls where they're going to be a product manager for a fashion company and they're going to whatever, the bullshit, the vocal fry bullshit that goes along with that, where they basically just recolor a t-shirt and stick a logo on it and then get it produced in Vietnam by some guy who's working for $1 a day and then ships it over. Right, that isn't real work, but the men of America that have been passed over, they need to do real work. Right, now...
I was just going to say real quick, the other reason why I think a lot of the commentary class are just failing to get the point, failing to understand what Trump's doing, are just arguing in bad faith because they're sort of never Trumpers or they've got TDS or whatever.
Or rhinos.
Yeah, right. For one reason or another, they want to see Trump fail. Want to see Trump lose, and so they just make any argument they can to against what he's doing.
But you are right. The whole extra $3,500. Well, for those places that have been completely disenfranchised, where all of the industry left 30 plus years ago and is now just a ghost town. Well, if now a factory opens up there, if somebody decides to offshore their manufacture back to America, well, I mean, he's got a job now, so he's earning money. And actually has money to spend, which is not a $3,500.
Before I move on to my final point, I just Josie in the chat said, "Danny, you're making fun of Appalachia." No, I'm not. I'm saying that those guys should have jobs, and that this is necessary. That's my entire point. I'm not making fun. I'm saying that it should be changed. But right, okay, finally, let me explain why this is more than just policy, not politics, which is my point throughout. I'm telling you why is this a absolutely hyper real, why this is a necessity, why this must happen. I'm going to tell you about a report put together by US General Mark Milley.
My favourite.
Yeah. So even he recognised the problem here. In 2018, there was a Pentagon-led report that basically said where they identified hundreds of instances where the US military is reliant on China for essential materials, including microelectrics, rare earth minerals, advanced electronics, and ammunition. So we have the US military is dependent on China at hundreds of different breakpoints. This is why manufacturing needs to come back. Now, I'm running a bit long on time, but I am going to have to play this video of Pete Hegseth explaining the extent of the problem. And if you cannot see why Trump is doing what he's doing after listening to this video, then God help you. Right.
The Pentagon is in the book the exact amount of years, but in the past X number of years, 10, 12, 15, the Pentagon has a perfect record in all of its war games against China. We lose every time inside the Pentagon war games. We know what our real capability. You see, we didn't even get to this part of the war on warriors. I mean, the military-industrial complex, the way we procure weapon systems. We're always the way our system works, the way our bureaucratic system works, where the speed of weapons procurement works. We're always a decade behind in fighting the last war. Whereas China, we have what did Rumsfeld say? You go to the war, the army you have. We have the army. China's building an army specifically dedicated to defeating the United States of America. That is their strategic outset. Take hypersonic missiles. So if our whole power projection platform is aircraft carriers and the ability to project power that way strategically around the globe. And yeah, we have a nuclear triad and all of that, but a big part of it. And if 15 hypersonic missiles can take out our 10 aircraft carriers in the first 20 minutes of a conflict, what does that look like?
Yeah.
I mean, and if they've already got us by the balls economically, which you pointed out very well, with our grid, culturally, there's plenty of elite capture going on around the globe. I mean, and then microchips and everything. Why do they want Taiwan? They want to corner the market completely on the technological future. We can't even drive our cars without the stuff we need out of China these days. I mean, they have a full spectrum, long-term view of not just regional but global domination, and we have our heads up our asses.
Yeah.
So there you go. Trump has shocked the world with tariffs, and that's a good thing.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.